Welcome to Hey, It's Carly Rae's Book Club. This is Book Hour, where authors will talk their latest novels, reveal their writing process, and chat all things books. I'm your host, Carly-Rae, here with best-selling author Rachel Van Dyken. Welcome, Rachel. I'm very excited to have you.
I'm so happy to talk to you. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, tell us where you're joining us from.
Boise, well, technically outside of Boise, but Eagle, Idaho.
Is it cold like now or?
Weirdly enough, it's really sunny. So like it looks like you're like, oh, it's like a nice spring day, and you go outside and you die. So I think it's like 34, 38. So not horrible. And it's very sunny, very nice. So you have to just like put on a jacket and just like go for it when you go outside. It's not horrible though. What about you? Is it cold where you're
I'm
at?
in Florida, yeah, and so it's like
Oh,
80 today. So if it was like 38 right now, I'd be like bundled up.
that's the expression where you're like horrified. No, can't move there. It's out.
Well, let's talk your latest novel you just published into July, The Godparent Trap. It centers around Colby and Rip. Tell viewers more about it.
Okay, so it was kind of like this forced proximity book based kind of off the movie Life as We Know It, where there's a girl that is in love with her best friend's brother, tells it was time, right? And loves him. He's like this very like grumpy hero, just very like by the book accountant that's just like, no, like everything has to be black and white. But like obviously for like reasons because he wants to protect himself. He's lost everything, lost his parents. So there's like reasons for his attitude. And they had one horrible date where she kissed him and then threw up on him, I believe. And like all these things happened. So like ever since then, it's been like this horrible like thing where she like pines for him but can't have him. And apparently like after like, you know, in the very first chapter, they talk about like how much she likes him and all this stuff. And they're planning like an anniversary for his sister, her friend. And what happens is obviously like it's not a spoiler, like obviously they die. That's what the whole book is about. And they end up inheriting or taking, not inheriting, that sounds horrible. They end up taking over these kids. And at the time, like I had just adopted. And so writing this book, I was like, oh my gosh, like I am in this chaos. I am in this whole, like, we have an infant, we have a 7-year-old or 6-year-old, like, how do we manage this? And so we have two people where Colby is very like wild and free and artsy and happy, would rather order McDonald's than actually cook a meal, which I'm here for, where he's like, why isn't it gluten-free? Why isn't it this? Like forced to stay in this house with these two little kids. And, you know, obviously personalities collide and it just gets chaotic. And I really wanted to bring in like the chaos of having kids because I think so often on social media, you're like, oh my gosh, how pretty. Like she's in that wonderful dress and they're holding her child in that perfect little coat. And it's like, no, they have Cheerios 10 minutes later stuck to their faces. There's milk everywhere. Like I wanted to really bring in that part with the romance. And so it's kind of like opposites attract, very fun.
Yeah. Now, were you a huge fan of Life as We Know It?
You know, at the time, I mean, I am now, but yeah, at the time I was like, this is the best thing ever. But I was younger than I am now. And so I was like, man, how would you even do that? Like she's sitting there like drinking wine, doing all these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is now me. Like there are days I have with my kids where I'm just like, I need to sit. And it doesn't matter like how I sit. I just need to like sit, just sit, you know, and that is kind of how like the book kind of progresses. And I kind of took my own experiences with that.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
who was your favorite character to craft in The Godparent Trap?
Honestly, I think it was Colby because I find myself in her to where I want to have it together and like the desire to have it together is totally there. And I want to have all the makeup on and I want to look like on point and do all of that. And then it just like and then you only have like 2 days of that and then it just like implodes, right? And then you have to just be you. And I think that's so important to be authentic and be you. And I think with him, she felt like even though he judged her, she had to be herself. And I really liked writing her. And normally, like female characters, I struggle with a little bit more because I prefer the male characters. But with her, I really identified with her, put myself in her a little bit because I was like, yep, I too have slime in my hair as I'm writing this. So I really identified with who she was.
Yeah. Now, what was the most difficult part of crafting The Godparent Trap?
I think the hardest part was I wanted to make it more emotional, probably outside of what contemporary and women's fiction would be. And my publisher was like, no, you can't do that. They won't like that. And I fought for it very hard in the end. And I was like, no, because we all have these moments and I can't spoil it, but we all have these moments where like in life, you can't explain things and things just happen. And I was like, we have to have this because that is what changes the trajectory of your life a lot of times. And so I really wanted to keep that. And at the end, the publisher allowed me, and I don't want to, again, spoil anything, but that was like the hardest struggle I had with it because I was like, no, the characters want this, they need this. And I'm the kind of author where I can't write what I want to write. I can't like impose my will on them. It has to be like, which sounds like a crazy person, psych major here. I get that. But the whole point is at the end of the day, it has to be them leading the story. and I can't not include that. And so that was a really big struggle for me because I'm like, I can't delete what I just wrote because that is their story and I have to put it on paper, even if everyone hates it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Now the cover is great. I really like all like the bright colors. Were you involved in the design process?
I knew it was going to be illustrated, which I preferred for this because I wanted people to go into it knowing it was going to be women's fiction with some romance, obviously, a lot of other dynamics in it. They sent it to me and it was so funny as I was like, it's like they took a screenshot of my son's room because we literally in the corner of my youngest son's room have a teepee that we had gotten for him with a little blanket. And I'm like, we also play like fort in this teepee. And so I cracked up and I was like, this is perfect. Like, this is like literally my life as I'm sitting texting back in front of it. Like, and so then we ended up laughing. We're like, should we take some pictures and post them to TikTok that you have the same one? I'm like, sure. So yeah, it was pretty funny that they actually came up with that.
Yeah. Now you also write in different genres. Do you have a favorite genre you write in?
Oh, that's, you know, I love writing contemporary. I love rom-com because it feels easier and it feels authentic. Not that the other ones don't, but you always need like a palate cleanser as a writer. You have to have like something that's like your passion. And for me, the contemporary is fun and I love it and I feel like it's very impactful. But I really prefer mafia and darker stuff because I feel, especially after like it's just been a rough couple of years, and I feel like that escape is so different and so fun. So I've been doing a lot of mafia, and I've always done mafia, but like fantasy, a lot of vampire stuff. And mostly for me, you know, like I love when readers love that, but I love writing in other genres that kind of stretch me and make me think about all of those different things rather than stuff that kind of like Godparent Trap, stuff that you deal with on a daily basis, which there's a time and place for that. And I love books that have that to where you open them and you're like, okay, it's going to be rough because I'm dealing with this right now. Or you don't even know when you read it and you start crying because you're like, wow, I went through that yesterday and I feel this. And I think there's a time and place for that. But I think there's also a time and place for that fictional escape where you're outside of reality and you can actually escape what you're going through.
Yeah. Now, do you have an all-time favorite novel you've written?
Oh, that's a really hard question. So I wrote Ruin a really long time ago. And it was done at my publisher, same publisher for Godparent Trap, Grand Central Publishing. And I had written it for my uncle who was dying of cancer. And I was like, can I publish this? And as you know, with, and for anyone watching, like when you're in a contract, you can't typically self-publish anything. You have to be very careful. And so I asked them permission to publish it. Within 2 weeks, I wrote it. And it was my own ending for him, even though I knew he was terminal. And I wrote him a happy ending versus a sad ending and was able to publish it. He read it before days before he died. And we donated all the money, almost all the money to his wife, my aunt.
Wow, that's really special. We'll definitely put the link in the description below too, so everybody can check it out. Yeah. Now, did you always want to be an author, even like growing up, or was this something you kind of fell into?
No, weirdly enough, I wanted to be an actress. I don't even know why, because like cameras freak me out. Like I've been on set a couple of times and every time I'm like have my little water bottle and it like crinkles and they're like, sorry. And in interviews, you know, yeah, I don't do well with camera because I always look at it. Like I'm used to doing interviews, not having to like pretend. So yeah, I wanted to do that. I wanted to do music at one point, auditioned for a girl group, do not ask why or when. And at the end of the day, ended up being like, man, there's something out there for me because I was always writing stories, always writing lyrics, and ended up falling into writing after being a school counselor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what was the process like for you? Like getting published, finding an agent? Was that something you did for a while or?
You know, I always tell people it happens different for every person. For me, it was kind of like a very different experience because I had queried a ton of publishers, agents and stuff, and everyone's like, no, we're good. And then an indie, and I had no idea what I was doing, by the way. So this is like me Googling like what, 11, 12, 13 years ago. And I had like a little folder of all these little places that were wanting queries. And it would take like a year to even get them to be like, sorry, we reject you. And you're like, cool, thanks. Been waiting for that rejection for a very long time. And then I had an indie publisher pick me up. And then my second book hit USA Today. So that never happens, by the way. That was like a very rare occurrence. And then continued to publish and do very well. And then hit number 1 on the New York Times. And then I had agents coming at me like crazy. And then picked one that, in my opinion, was going to be the best for like being a hybrid author, where if anyone listening, you're doing both indie and self-publishing and traditional publishing, doing both together and kind of just like combining a career to where you get different readers, where you have people that maybe are at Target, like wanting to buy a book and you have your books distributed there, or maybe they're just online on Amazon, they're a KU member and they just want that book. So a very different thing. And she was really awesome about that.
Yeah. Now, when can readers find more books from you, or like when are you going to be releasing more?
So I had one released last month. I'm like, I had to think about it. I'm like, wait, what day is it? Last month. And then next month, I actually have another book releasing too, my Mafia book. My end of my, like, I call it my OG Mafia series. It's been out for like 10, 11 years. It's the final book in that series, which is, I think, book 14.
Wow.
It's also coming out. So yeah, I have a lot of stuff. I kind of had to take a time out with some, like, we had some like TV series and other things going on. I had to write a pilot. So I don't want to say I took time off writing, but I had a lot of series I needed to finish. And so between those times, which I feel so bad for readers because it took like 2 years in between, and also adopting and having a, infant at the time, I was like, okay, I have to focus on this. And so now I'm finally ending all these series and starting more contemporaries at the same time.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add, like about your upcoming books or anything in general for readers or viewers?
I think the biggest thing is, yes, I have a ton of books coming out and they're all different genres, but my voice is always the same. So just jump in. I think that my backlist can be kind of overwhelming. And I get that a lot where people are like, well, there's 140 books. Like, where do I start? There's all these different series. Like, you wrote Regency, and then you wrote this weird contemporary, and then you were like doing vampires for a day, and then you had angels. And I'm like, yes, that's all true. So I think the biggest thing is just, if you're new to me, always email me. I will respond. But there's always going to be something for whatever you need. And I'm first a reader, second an author. And so I always try to write the way that I read. So whatever you need, I hope that I can provide that for you, and I have that for you.
Yeah. Well, you heard Rachel, go check her out now. Thank you all so much for joining me on Book Hour. Tune in next week for an all new episode. In the meantime, you can stay up to date on all things Hey, It's Carly Rae on social media and on my website, HeyitsCarlyRae.com.
Awesome. Thank you.